Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going on a deep dive into a fascinating connection between a real-life figure, Anna Julia Cooper, and a beloved fictional character, Calpurnia, from To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, this is going to be good. I love Calpurnia.
Me too.
Yeah.
She's such a strong presence in the book. And what we're going to explore is how understanding Cooper's life can actually give us a richer perspective on Calpurnia's world. Cooper was a remarkable black educator and author, and she lived from the late 1800s into the mid-1900s.
So right around the same time period as To Kill a Mockingbird is set.
Exactly. And Cooper's story really illuminates the complexities of black literacy and social navigation in a segregated society.
Which, of course, is the very world Calpurnia navigates in the novel.
Precisely. So to kick things off, can you tell us a bit about Anna Julia Cooper and what made her such a remarkable figure?
Well, where do we even begin? This woman was a force of nature. She achieved incredible things. I mean, just imagine earning a PhD at a time when most women, let alone black women, were denied access to higher education.
That's mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. And she didn't stop there. Cooper went on to head the M Street School, which later became the famous Dunbar High School right here in Washington, D.C.
Wow, I didn't realize that connection.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing legacy. And we're talking about a school that set incredibly high standards and produced generations of black leaders and intellectuals.
So she was clearly a champion of education for black students.
Absolutely. But you have to remember, this was all happening during a really intense debate about the purpose of black education itself. Like, thinkers like W.E.B. Du Bois argued for cultivating a talented tenth of black intellectuals.
Right, the idea of focusing resources on developing a select group of highly educated leaders.
Exactly. While Booker T. Washington, on the other hand, emphasized vocational training for the masses. He believed that practical skills were the key to uplifting the black community.
So two very different approaches.
Yes, and Cooper, who was actually friends with both Dubois and Washington, kind of carved out her own path. She advocated for a well-rounded education that would empower all black students.
I'm curious, how did her vision for black education go over with, say, the powers that be at the time?
Well, not so well, to be honest. She faced a lot of pushback, particularly from the white male-dominated school board. They often favored a more practical, vocational approach.
Kind of like Booker T. Washington's philosophy.
Yeah, very much so. They believed that black students should primarily be trained for manual labor, to prepare them for the roles that society had deemed acceptable for them.
But Cooper had a different vision.
Oh, absolutely. She fought tirelessly to provide her students with a strong academic curriculum. She believed they were capable of so much more than society expected of them. She really pushed for them to have access to the same opportunities as their white counterparts.
It's fascinating to think how those opposing views on education, those different ideas about what black people should be learning and striving for, might actually reflect the larger social dynamics at play in a place like Macomb, where To Kill a Mockingbird takes place.
Right, like what opportunities were truly available to black people and how did education, or the lack of it, factor into their social standing?
And that brings us to Calpurnia. The novel doesn't explicitly say what her educational background was, but it's very clear that she's literate. She can read and write, which sets her apart in Macomb.
Especially during that time period in the South where literacy among black people was not as widespread.
One of the things that I find really interesting about Calpurnia is how she communicates so differently depending on where she is and who she's with.
Oh, absolutely. Like at church, her language and mannerisms are so different from how she interacts with Jem and Scout at the Finch house.
It's like she's code switching. She's adapting her language and behavior to fit in with the social context.
You've hit on something really important there. That code switching, that ability to navigate different social spaces, speaks volumes about the power dynamics at play in Macomb's racially divided society.
It makes you wonder, do you think Calpurnia's code switching might be connected to how Cooper was preparing her students to navigate a world that often viewed them as less than?
That's a really great connection.
Like, was Cooper trying to instill in her students this understanding that they needed to be able to adapt to different social situations in order to thrive?
I think that's very likely. Just as Cooper understood that her students needed more than just academic knowledge to succeed in a society that often tried to limit their opportunities, Calpurnia also demonstrates a similar awareness. She knows how to navigate the complexities of her world.
And of course, one of the most striking things about Calpurnia is how she acts as this bridge between the black and white communities in Macomb. She moves between these two worlds in a way that very few other characters can.
Right, she's a bit of an anomaly in that sense.
Do you see any parallels there with Cooper's own life?
Absolutely. Cooper, like Calpurnia, had to constantly navigate between the world of white academia and the realities of black life in a segregated America. And her writings really reflect this. She tackled complex issues of race, gender, and class, showing a really deep understanding of the forces at play in society.
It's amazing to think that Cooper's life, which is so rich and complex, can actually give us such a deeper understanding of a fictional character like Calpurnia.
Right. And that's what makes exploring history so fascinating. It gives us these new lenses through which to view the present, even works of fiction that we thought we knew so well.
Makes you wonder if Calpurnia might have faced similar challenges and pressures as Cooper did.
Oh, I'm sure she did. I mean, both women were strong, intelligent, and determined to make a difference in their communities.
But they also lived in a time when society tried to dictate the roles that black women could and could not play.
Exactly. They had to push against those limitations constantly. It's really fascinating when you think about it. Both Cooper and Calpurnia, they lived in a society that tried to put them in a box, to limit them. And yet, they both carved out these spaces where they could teach and lead.
Yeah, Cooper in academia and Calpurnia in the Finch household and her own community. It really makes you wonder what must it have been like for them to navigate those different worlds, with all those different expectations placed on them.
You're touching on something really important there. Cooper actually wrote quite a bit about this idea of double consciousness that Black Americans experience.
Double consciousness, what do you mean by that?
It's this feeling of always looking at yourself through the eyes of a society that often devalues and marginalizes you. Like you're always aware of how you're being perceived by the dominant culture.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So like always having to be conscious of two different perspectives.
Exactly. Your own and the one that society imposes on you.
I can only imagine how exhausting that must be.
It is, and I think Calpurnia must have felt something similar, especially in a place like Macomb.
Yeah, I mean, think about the way she interacts with Aunt Alexandra. She clearly doesn't approve of Calpurnia's influence on Scout and Jem.
Oh, Aunt Alexandra, she's the embodiment of those rigid social norms, right? She really represents those forces that were trying to keep Black people, especially Black women, in very limited roles.
And Calpurnia handles those interactions with such grace. Like, she never really loses her cool, even when she's facing pretty overt prejudice.
It's remarkable. It makes me think of that horrible scandal that was fabricated to try to discredit Cooper.
Oh, right. The one with her foster son.
Yeah, it was a completely baseless accusation, but it really speaks volumes about the lengths people would go to just to undermine the success of a Black woman who dared to challenge the status quo.
It's awful. But what's inspiring is that just like Cooper refused to be silenced, Calpurnia keeps right on guiding and educating Scout and Jem. Even when she's facing criticism and judgment, she's that steady moral presence in their lives.
Exactly. It makes you think that maybe Calpurnia, much like Cooper, saw her role as more than just caring for those kids. She was preparing them to navigate a world filled with injustice.
Like she was trying to equip them with the tools they'd need to survive and thrive.
Right. Think about all those little lessons she gives them about treating everyone with respect, regardless of their social standing. It's subtle, but it's powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And all of this was happening during a time when simply teaching Black children to read and write could be seen as a radical act.
It was a direct challenge to the power structure.
Which makes Calpurnia's literacy even more significant. It almost becomes a form of resistance.
It absolutely is. It's her way of asserting her humanity in a society that was constantly trying to deny it.
And her ability to move between those two worlds,
Yeah.
the Black community and the white community of Macomb. That's powerful.
It really is. It shows this deep understanding of the nuances of language and social customs in both.
And it takes us right back to Cooper and all the complexities of Black education during that time. She understood that in order for her students to truly succeed, they needed more than just book smarts.
They needed that social intelligence. They needed to understand the unspoken rules of a society that was often stacked against them.
Because it wasn't just about learning facts and figures. It was about surviving.
Right. It was about navigating a world that wasn't always fair or just.
And I think both Cooper and Calpurnia embody that delicate balance. Like, they held on to their own values and traditions, but they also knew how to maneuver in a world that wasn't always welcoming.
And their stories remind us that education, real education, isn't just about memorizing stuff. It's about developing critical thinking skills. It's about empathy. It's about understanding the world around you, including its injustices.
It makes you wonder what those folks who wanted to limit Black education were so afraid of.
I know, right? It's almost like they knew that knowledge is power, that an educated person is harder to control.
That they might start to question things, to demand more.
Exactly. And a society built on inequality can't afford to have people thinking too critically.
Makes me appreciate the strength and resilience of women like Cooper and Calpurnia even more. I mean, they were fighting for education and equality against some pretty formidable forces.
They were true trailblazers.
Absolutely. And their legacies still resonate today, inspiring us to keep pushing for a more just and equitable world.
You know, it really is incredible when you think about it, the impact Cooper had and how her fight for quality education for Black students connects to Calpurnia in To Kill a Mockingbird.
And it's not even just advocating for education in a general sense. Cooper really pushed for teaching Black history and Black culture, which was something that was often left out of the curriculum back then.
Yeah, and that makes me think about how Calpurnia brings Scout and Jem to her church, and they get to see this whole other side of Maycomb that most white people never really experience. Oh, that's such a pivotal moment in the novel, right? It's like Calpurnia is not just teaching them about reading and writing. She's giving them this glimpse into a whole other world, this world full of tradition and community and strength.
And it's so interesting how the language and even just the way people interact at Calpurnia's church are so different from what Scout and Jem are used to at home or at school.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's this real sense of freedom there in the way the congregation interacts with each other. Remember how Scout's kind of thrown off by the way Calpurnia speaks? Like her language changes, it becomes more familiar and more comfortable in that setting.
Yeah, it's almost like she's stepping back into her truest self when she's in her own community.
That's a great way to put it. It really highlights just how much of a burden code switching is, having to constantly adjust how you speak and how you act just to fit into the dominant culture.
It makes you wonder, do you think that sense of belonging, being able to just fully be yourself, is something that Cooper was also trying to instill in her students?
Oh, absolutely. Cooper firmly believed that education should nurture the whole person, and that included their cultural identity and their sense of belonging. She knew that for Black students to really thrive, they needed to feel proud of their heritage, not ashamed of it.
It makes you wonder if that's part of why she faced so much pushback from those who wanted to limit Black education. Maybe they were afraid of the power that comes with embracing your identity and your history.
That's a really thought-provoking idea. Education can be such a powerful tool for social change, and those in power often try to control what's being taught and who gets to learn it. Cooper challenged those power structures by insisting on a curriculum that celebrated Black culture and Black history, and that really empowered her students to see themselves as agents of change.
It really seems like both Cooper and Calpurnia understood that true education goes way beyond just acquiring knowledge or skills. It's about fostering critical thinking and empathy and a sense of responsibility to your community.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And their stories really remind us that the fight for educational equity and social justice is far from over. The challenges they faced back then are still so relevant today as we continue to grapple with systemic racism and inequality and the fight to make sure everyone has access to quality education.
So what can we take away from all of this? What can we learn from these incredible women?
Well, for me, their stories are a call to action. They inspire us to challenge the status quo, to speak out against injustice, and to keep fighting for a world where education is truly a tool for liberation and empowerment. They show us that even when we face huge obstacles, we can make a difference.
It's a powerful message, and it resonates so deeply when we consider the context of To Kill a Mockingbird and the ongoing struggle for racial justice in our own world today.
And I think the connections we've made between Cooper's life and Calpurnia's character in the book really highlight how much we can gain by looking to the past. History isn't just some collection of dates and events. It's a rich tapestry of human experience, and it can shed light on the present and inspire us to build a more just and equitable future.
I really hope this deep dive is giving you, the listener, a deeper understanding of Calpurnia's world and a newfound appreciation for the incredible Anna Julia Cooper. Their stories, though separated by time and circumstance, remind us that the pursuit of knowledge and justice is a journey worth taking. Thanks for joining us.